And it's BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia at heart and from around the globe. And hello, everybody. Today is Tuesday. It is time for True Crime Talk Radio in the morning. I am your host, Black Box Ned. And because today is Tuesday, I can say hello to Snoopy here. True Crime Talk Radio is a segment here on Black Box Online Radio where we can talk about multiple subjects within a single episode, coming to you every Tuesday and Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for the Autumn of Terror. And we have some people here in the chat. Firstly, we have Darkside. Hello, how's it going? Mike says, hello, Team BBO War. I can't write today. It's cool, Mike. I mess up all the time. And Paranoid Android is here who says, Ned is my role model. Amazing. Thank you so much. And in this episode, I'm going to be talking all about Steven Avery making a murderer and the case of Teresa Hallback. This is one that is intended to be a follow-up to a recent interview that was done on the channel Mysteries with Mr. Belgique. And firstly, I would like to give a big thank you to everyone who listened to the interview over there with Jerry Buting, who was one of the people featured on the docuseries Making a Murderer, as well as the author of the book Illusion of Justice. Jerry Buting was the former defense attorney for the defendant in the story of Making a Murderer, Steven Avery. In 2005, a woman named Teresa Hallback went missing, and it was determined that she was murdered. Her remains were mutilated and dismembered, and she was burned, and the bones were scattered in several different places. And yes, this is going to be an episode where I'm going to be talking about some very horrific things, but this is a very popular true crime case and a widely publicized true crime case, and a lot of you are familiar with the details, but just providing a disclaimer all the same. And the prime suspect in the case became an individual named Steven Avery. Steven Avery's story does not begin in 2005. It actually begins in 1985 when a woman named Penny Bernstein wrongfully accused him of attacking her, and he was arrested, tried and convicted, sent to jail, and he spent 18 years in prison for a crime that he did not commit. The attack on Penny Bernstein was not committed by Steven Avery. It was committed by a different individual named Gregory Allen, and Steven Avery was exonerated because of DNA evidence in 2003. He was free for 2 years, and in 2005, he became the prime suspect in the Hallback murder, and then he was arrested and sent back to prison, and that became the foundation of Making a Murderer. And firstly, I have to give full credit to Jerome from the channel Mysteries with Mr. Belgique. That is his channel. He is somebody who has followed the story of Steven Avery very closely. Mysteries with Mr. Belgique used to be called The French Wrecking Crew, and Wrecking Crew is the title of a book by John Ferrac, which talks about demolishing the case against Steven Avery. Jerome is from Belgium, of course, so he calls it The French Wrecking Crew, and it has since been renamed Mysteries with Mr. Belgique. So, in terms of participating in the interview with Jerry Buting, Steven Avery's defense attorney, I have to thank Jerome so much for asking me to be a co-host for that one. And I really appreciated the opportunity, not only because Jerry Buting is famous, but also because I had the opportunity to talk to someone whose book I've read. In 2023, I did a direct response to Jerry Buting's book, Illusion of Justice, which you can hear on this channel. And I'm also going to be very honest that Jerry Buting is perhaps the second most famous person that I've ever interviewed. The first would have to be Aphrodite Jones, and then would be Jerry Buting, because he was on Making a Murderer, and he's the author of Illusion of Justice. And I've also had the opportunity to interview Richard Jones of the Jack the Ripper Tour channel, and his YouTube channel is very big. He's also the real deal with the Jack the Ripper Tour, doing the tour sometimes 7 days a week. And we also just had a recent interview come out here on Black Box Online Radio with David Oranchak, talking all about the Zodiac Killer ciphers, as well as his role in solving the Zodiac Killer's 340. Lots of content here on Black Box Online Radio, so you can hit the like button and subscribe if you want to follow along with all of these discussions, as well as subscribe to Mysteries with Mr. Belgique, and leave a comment if you have something to say. And you can download this program for free anywhere you get your podcasts under the name Black Box True Crime or Black Box Podcast. All right, so one of the reasons why people look into the story of Making a Murderer, of Steven Avery and Teresa Hallback, is they simply want to ask the question, did he do it? Was he guilty? Was he framed? And it's very challenging. I had the opportunity to talk to his defense attorney, and I'm just asking the question, do you think Steven Avery was guilty? You're not his defense attorney anymore. He has Kathleen Zellner now. And he said, no, I don't think that he was guilty. So one of you guys in the chat had the same question that I did. The absolute biggest question that I had for Jerry Buting was, all right, if you don't think that Steven Avery was guilty, who did it? What happened to Teresa Hallback? And it is so much more than who committed the murder. We're talking about the disposal of the remains, providing people with alibis, cover stories. Who was responsible? And he simply said, I don't know. And part of me was like, I am so disappointed to hear that. The other part of me was thinking, I completely get you, because at the time of that interview, I had no idea what happened to Teresa Hallback, and I've read several books about Making a Murderer in addition to watching the first two seasons, and maybe they'll be doing something more on Netflix in the future. But, I also have done responses to Wrecking Crew, as well as to Convicting Avery by Michael Cicchini, and I have no idea what happened to Teresa Hallback. And to actually pinpoint someone who has committed this murder is very difficult. Now, something that came up in the discussions was that there's a video out there by Dr. Todd Grande that came out several years ago. And Dr. Todd Grande has come under fire a lot in recent months for all of the inaccuracies in his very popular YouTube channel. Dr. Todd Grande has videos on almost every true crime case that I talk about here on Black Box Online Radio over the last 2 or 3 years. However, the things that he gets accused of are misstating pieces of information, getting the facts wrong, and misrepresenting the stories. And he's trying to make these types of psychological observations. And he understands psychology. He's a real counselor and psychologist, but he's doing it with incorrect information. His Zodiac Killer video was filled with that. And other people have called him out for the video on Missy Beavers. Jerome, who has followed this case for 7 years, called him out for his video on Steven Avery and Making a Murderer. Yeah, Dr. Todd Grande did Zodiac too, and I've done a direct response to that as an old Black Box recording, and I talked about it on a recent Zodiac Monday from about 4 weeks ago, maybe 5 weeks ago, actually, on the Zodiac Killer News Report. I have to be honest with you guys, his Zodiac video was filled with mistakes, errors, and misinformation. And, we can go into some of the specifics later on. But in terms of the Making a Murderer video, I noticed that there's a particular aspect of his presentations, and I rewatched it today, that is not found in a lot of other true crime cases. And that is that he approaches this in a twofold manner. Number one, he gives his interpretations of the evidence as a psychologist. Sure, he's a psychologist and a counselor. The second is he gives his interpretations of the law, and he's not a lawyer. Should he be doing that? Yes. I'm not a psychologist or a lawyer. I give my crap all the time on the internet. Why not? So, as far as some of the things that he said about Steven Avery and Making a Murderer, that is that he thinks that Steven Avery was guilty. However, his legal opinion was there is reasonable doubt. He should not have been found guilty in a court of law because you should not convict if there is reasonable doubt. And I was like, wow, that's a bold statement if you actually think this guy killed somebody, but you're like, there are doubts. I mean, I get what he's saying. You think he did it. Well, are you actually sure? And I do agree with this assessment. In the United States of America, the legal system encourages and instructs juries not to find somebody guilty in those situations. Dr. Todd Grande also said this about the Jeffrey McDonald case. He thinks he did it, but there are doubts. And if there are doubts, you're not supposed to convict. And this goes so far beyond Steven Avery because his nephew, Brendan Dassey, was also found guilty of being a co-conspirator and a murderer and participating in the sexual assault of Teresa Hallback, and he is still in prison to this day. And I have lots of episodes about this case that are available here on Black Box Online Radio that were made in 2022 and 23, and even one from last year. So if you want to hear a lot of the more detailed opinions I have, but I was listening back to one today, and I was just saying, I am shocked that Brendan Dassey is still in jail. And Ed Edward Ciphers is in the chat here. Okay, I said that this is going to be a follow-up to the interview that we did with Jerry Buting. Ed Edwards, you listening? You asked him, what did he think about the Siki letter? And he's like, okay, I read that stuff 20 years ago or something like that. Not 20 years, maybe 18 years ago, 17 years ago, whenever it was. And he did not have a comment on it because he wasn't familiar with it. So I went and I read the Siki letter today because I said we're doing this follow up. Now, the exact text, Ed Edwards, you can help me out with this, is that the remains were burned in an aluminum smelting barrel and something like that, something to that effect. It's a very short message. It's a very short letter, but it talks about the disposal of human remains, right? And Edwards says he needs to call and work with Kathleen Zellner to have the FBI review the letter. Yes, it's short. It's just that, right? It's just one extended sentence, perhaps. Oh, Ed Edwards Ciphers is here, so he says it's encrypted. Hey, Ed Edwards, please put anything in the chat, and I will try my best to respond to that and, show me what you're trying to say, and we will go through it. But I wanted this to be a follow-up to Jerry Buting's interview. So he did another interview on the Dr. Phil program, of all places, and was actually a prosecutorial defense interview. They also had Ken Kratz, the prosecutor in the Steven Avery case, on Dr. Phil as well. Now, a lot of people might not like Ken Kratz, the prosecutor. Ken Kratz got on national television, with Dr. Phil saying, I was receiving death threats. People didn't like me after Making a Murderer came out. And I was just thinking, no matter what anybody says about Steven Avery, Brendan Dassey, or about Teresa Hallback, or about Jerry Buting, why don't people like the prosecutor in the case, Ken Kratz? Because he's arrogant and annoying. Almost every sentence out of his mouth did not contain words. It was just just noises and grunting and when other people are talking. Arrogant and annoying. He did himself no favors. And maybe he thinks that that's going to be somewhat persuasive to people. He made the audience laugh once. Arrogant and annoying. So, on this episode of Dr. Phil, they had 3 major challenge questions that came up. And these are things that I'm going to ask to you guys. You can put your responses in the live chat to anyone who's listening to this live. If you're listening to this in the future, you can put it in the comment section down below. Question number 1. How did the key fob get into Teresa's locked car? Steven Avery was convicted for the murder of Teresa Hallback. Ken Kratz and the prosecutorial team put forward the theory that Teresa Hallback was a photographer for Auto Trader, was on the Avery property to photograph cars because she was a photographer for Auto Trader. All right, there we go. And they claim that Steven Avery lured her into the bedroom in the trailer or mobile home where he was staying, that she was handcuffed to the wall, one arm on each bedpost. Her legs were spread open with leg irons. She was sexually assaulted, stabbed in the stomach, and then ultimately mutilated, dismembered, taken to a burn barrel, set on fire, and then the remains were dumped in a burn pit on Steven Avery's property. Teresa's car, a Toyota RAV4, was found on the property. However, it was mixed in with the other cars from the salvage yard. Inside Steven Avery's bedroom was Teresa's car key. But what Ken Kratz said, a key piece of evidence that convicted Steven Avery, was that the car key was connected to a key fob and lanyard that could be separated or attached. I mean, you guys get the idea. And if the key was found in the bedroom and the lanyard was found in a locked car on the property, how did these things get there without Steven Avery manually placing it there? And that's a big challenge. And Jerry Buting's response was, who cares? And I know some of you might be thinking that. Some of you might be thinking that, okay, well, that's not the point. Was the key planted in the bedroom or not? That's the important part. And as far as Jerry Buting's claims and theories go, yeah, that's absolutely more important. But what Ken Kratz was trying to say was that these 2 items are connected. It appears that somebody removed the key fob and lanyard at one point, left it in Teresa's car, and the car was locked, yet the key was taken externally into Steven Avery's bedroom. I think that you could just as easily make a case that the hoaxer or someone who's trying to frame him did that, and they left the lanyard in the car. You could also make the case that Teresa had removed the key fob and lanyard at some point on her own accord prior to arriving at Steven Avery's house. I'm really not on par with everything that Ken Kratz was trying to say, and I don't think that was a very convincing piece of evidence. Question number 2. This is for you guys in the chat, as well as anyone listening. I'm going to give my response to. How did Brendan Dassey know information that only the police or the killer should know if he were indeed innocent? Point number 1. They would ask checking questions. They would ask questions that were not meant to be leading. They were asking questions to try and see, is he just going along with what they're saying, or is he actually telling them the truth? Like, did he participate in the murder? And, you could be like, yeah, just kind of like saying things to get them to stop talking. So they asked him a question. Brendan Dassey, the nephew of Steven Avery. Did Teresa have any tattoos? And he said, I don't remember any. And Teresa had a tattoo on her stomach. Do you remember what it was? No. And Teresa did not have a tattoo on her stomach at all. It was a question to see if he could follow what they were saying, or is he just going along with this because he wants them to stop talking to him? Isn't it ironic that they are trying to get the truth from someone by lying to them? And this is also what we have to understand about police interrogations. The police have the right to lie to you. I don't like it. I doubt that you like it. But they will do stuff like that, and they openly admitted they're asking him this question that's a pure lie to see if he's telling the truth or not. I think there's an enormous difference between I don't remember and no or yes or something to that effect. And I think a response such as I don't remember is the type of vague answer that Brendan Dassey's supporters would be talking about and indicating and everything of the sort, when they're just like, he's giving vague responses because he's just trying to get them to stop talking. Mike says every little thing matters. Ed Edwards says you read the Siki letter like everyone else read it, but a cryptologist would read it differently. It's not a letter, it's a nomenclature cipher. Tell me more, Ed Edwards, about the smelting and the metal. It says aluminum smelting, right, in the Siki letter. Please share any info you want. Dark Side of the Moon says, what Brendan said, what Steven did with the ashes lines up with the dog alerting behind Steven's trailer behind Radance, Radaunts. Dark Side, what do you mean by that? Now, Dark Side, I was following along with you on the live stream with Jerry Buting, and you said that for 7 years you thought that Steven Avery was innocent, right? And then you had a reversal where you ultimately ended up thinking that he was guilty. I mean, I think that if anybody thinks that he's guilty, they might be somewhat in line with Dr. Todd Grande saying reasonable doubt. And some of the reasons for reasonable doubt is the police appear to have butchered their own investigation. They have created so many causes for concern. The police acted so suspiciously that they've already acted like they're not giving this person a fair trial, fair investigation. They act like they're fudging the facts for everything. Darkseid says, yes, get on Discord. We need to talk like, hey, no, Dr. Todd Grande, I did my research. Dr. Todd Grande just kind of like makes a video very fast and he just chucks them out, as many as he can, as quickly as he can, because he's very popular. He can get 200,000 views on something easily, and I'm sure there's some money in it for him. Darkseid says, I read the trial transcripts, calls, reports, and interviews. Good, absolutely. And it's so hard for me to maintain the stance that Steven and Brendan are innocent when you go through some of the harder pieces of evidence and they're just talking about how you have this consistent narrative on how Steven Avery acts one way in front of the cameras, and then he's writing these insulting and degrading letters to his fiancée to the point where she wants nothing to do with him, where his other ex stated that she had to ingest rat poison to go to the hospital so she could get away from him. And it sounds like he's extremely two-faced, and the judge at his trial openly said, "You are the most dangerous offender that I've ever encountered." And the narrative that they're putting forward is this guy spent 18 years in prison for a crime that he didn't commit. He was released from prison and he thought he was untouchable. He beat the system. He's going to get $36 million in a lawsuit. So he concocted a plan to go after Teresa Hallback. She was specifically targeted, and he called and asked for her to come to the property. He gave his sister's name as a contact name, not his. And one point that appears to be somewhat kind of misrepresented is Teresa Hallback had been to the Avery property before, and one time Steven Avery answered the door while wearing a towel, and Teresa was extremely bothered by that. But what Jerry Buting says on the Dr. Phil show is that that's a misinterpretation. Yeah, he answered the door in a towel and she didn't like it, but it was something that she would joke about with her friends and colleagues about, weird experiences that she had at work, and she wasn't scared the way that they're making it out to be. And Ed Edward Ciphers says it's one of two ciphers that are connected to the case. The other was inside Avery's trailer. Ed Edward Ciphers, I'm going to be very direct with you. John Cameron accused Ed Edwards of committing the murder of Teresa Hallback. Do you agree or disagree? Because I know you don't agree with everything that John Cameron has stated. But to answer this question, how did Brendan Dassey know information that only the real killer or the police should know? The defense has concocted this response: that he, Brendan, was just giving long pauses before the answers, and he's just kind of like looking around. He's trying to read the room a little bit, like, what do they want to hear? And he's like, what do they want to hear about? Well, who did it? Steve. He's just trying to get the vibes from the interrogators. And then ultimately, he's going to say something like, he stabbed her, something to that effect. I mean, when you listen to the investigators, it sounds like they're extremely guilty. When you listen to the defense attorneys, they sound like they're extremely innocent. Question 3 for you guys in the chat and everybody listening. What happened to the blood evidence? Jerry Buting openly asked this to Ken Kratz. If what you say is true, that Teresa Hallback was handcuffed to the bed in Steven Avery's home and she was stabbed in the stomach, why is there no blood evidence found on the bed? Why is there no blood evidence found in the bedroom? If she was stabbed in the stomach and bleeding all over the place, why wasn't there any blood left behind? And the prosecution simply concocted the response of, Steven Avery scoured the trailer. He used bleach to wipe down everything in the bedroom. The bedding was then taken from the bedroom and gone to the burn pit or similar location. And this will enter some points of Jerry Buting's analyses that I think he's very good at. No matter what you think about guilty or innocent, the parts where I think Jerry Buting is very good and very strong at is when he tries to highlight certain things in the case that do not make sense, the way that a defense attorney should. And one of them would be that, all right, to anybody who thinks that Steven Avery is guilty, if the prosecution is putting forward this case that Teresa had her arms handcuffed to his bedposts, one arm on each bedpost, why were there no scratches on the bedposts? Because if someone is being sexually assaulted and being murdered, there should be all types of scratches from the metal penetrating and moving up and down on the bedposts. I agree completely. You can see the photos, like Darkside is saying new reports and photos have been released online. You can see the photos of the bedposts. I don't see scratches of someone who has been fighting for any amount of time, pulling on handcuffs that would have been attached to the bedposts. Number 2, if Steven Avery was this brilliant criminal who knew how to destroy all of the evidence in the bedroom. And he knew how to wipe down the whole bedroom with bleach, burning the sheets, burning any type of mattress pad that would have had an ounce of blood on it, burning all the bedding that would have had blood. Why did he leave blood evidence in her car? Why did he leave blood evidence in the RAV4? Why did he leave blood evidence, period, in Teresa's vehicle? That's the question number 2. And the prosecution was actually stumped by this for a little bit, but then they just kind of took a second and paused, and then they were like, well, now wait a second. Brendan Dassey was the one who provided that information, and he stated that he wanted that Steven wanted to have the car crushed because, again, it's a salvage yard, so it's almost as if they just had this plan to deal with the car later. And it sounds like it would have been Steven Avery who had the plan to deal with the car later. And Dark Side of the Moon says the directors left out information and phone calls. Steven groomed his 16-year-old niece. He admits things in calls and embedded confessions. Okay, Dark Side. This is well beyond making a murderer right now. This is talking about the crime scene photos. And even if somebody like Steven Avery, who reportedly had an IQ of 70, was the person who committed the murder, how would he be able to destroy all of the blood evidence in the bedroom? How would he be able to not even leave a speck of blood behind? Yet there's a key on the floor in plain sight. You got every micro droplet of blood, yet you left the key to Teresa's car in plain sight? And Dark Side of the Moon says, Steven ain't that slow, let me tell you. Dark Side, all right. I know I was trying to debate you for a second, but I've definitely had that response too. I fully admit that I didn't understand what an IQ of 70 was. Firstly, I thought this people who had the IQ of like 65 or 70 have much, much less cognitive function than they actually do. This is all years ago, mind you. I was wrong. I blame that damn movie Forrest Gump. He had an IQ of 75, by the way. Steven Avery doesn't sound like he's dumb all of the time. Steven Avery is making phone calls and instructing people on what to do, and he's just like commanding things with the presence of authority. He doesn't sound dumb when he's doing that. Maybe he's just like bad at math or something. Maybe he forgot how to buy underpants in the 1980s. That appears to be documented. But no, I don't think that he's dumb. And if it actually turns out that he is guilty, two-part issue. What about Brendan Dassey? I don't even think Brendan Dassey should be in prison at this time. I mean, I can put up hashtag free Brendan Dassey, I think, for all of the reasons. You could say he didn't get a fair trial. You could say that he was definitely led and coerced in certain ways. And at the very least, he has served at least, 19 years in prison. See, I don't know any math either. I had to count. Darkside said, I was a supporter and a staff member in many groups for years. Once I found the truth, they stopped speaking to me and trashed me, Ned. We can agree to disagree. It's okay. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. These are interpretations of the evidence. And I know Darkside. Everything that you're saying isn't some reflection of my character, and what I say to you isn't a reflection of your character. I would rather stand alone with the truth than follow the crowd with a lie. And Ed Edwards says, what do you mean by a staff member of a group? Well, on Facebook, the groups have admins and like moderators who deal with the content. And I'm sure they have this on the other things. Facebook is really the only place that I use for that. I have a Facebook page, Black Box Online Radio, as well as a personal Facebook page, Ned DeHaan on Facebook. And yeah, Darkside was a moderator in one of the groups. That's the staff member. But Darkside, do you see scratches on the bedpost from handcuffs that would have been moving up and down while someone was being assaulted? I mean, do you think it's plausible that Steven Avery would be able to get all of the blood evidence out of the bedroom? Here's another point raised by Jerry Buting. And as I said, in his own defense attorney ways, he's very good at highlighting the things that don't quite make sense. And that is that the prosecution's claim is that Steven Avery took Teresa's remains, put them into a burn barrel at some other location, burned her body, and then came back and dumped the remains in the burn pit on his property. How on earth does that make any sense? Someone burned somebody's remains away from where they live, then they brought the evidence back to where they live? Nonsensical. Oh, I agree. I agree. And that might make it sound like he was maybe not the brightest at that point. And also, this happens completely all the time on forensic files. I know, as you see, I've given a lot of reasons about why Avery might be innocent. But if you were to do that, you wouldn't be the sharpest tool in the shed, but people do that all the time on forensic files. Murdering somebody, burying them in the backyard. There's a whole true crime show called Buried in the Backyard. But a difference is, most of those people didn't murder somebody off-site and then transport them back to their home. Thanks, Snoop. And I know what some of you are already thinking. All right. It sounds like what they're trying to say is maybe he committed the murder in his home. He took the body off-site to burn it in a barrel so it wouldn't be noticed, so he wouldn't be noticed, and he comes back to his property because they have the burn pit, and he thought that that would have been an inconspicuous way to hide the remains. Yes. Well, Darkseid says something here. Lawyers will say anything to get their client free. It's their job. Sure. But Jerry Buting is no longer Steven Avery's defense attorney, so that's why I asked him directly, hey, you're not the attorney anymore for Avery. Do you think he did it? And he said no. Casbah is here, says morning. Good morning to you too, Casbah. And Rob Beansman is here who says hello. I'm still waiting for a response from Ed Edwards Ciphers. So I'm going to pull up a copy of the Siki letter that Ed Edwards was talking about, and we're just going to go through some of the details real fast. And although Ed Edwards, though, did say that I probably won't be able to understand it because I'm not a cryptographer, I don't do stuff like that. I will always try. Because like I said, if other people are going to be talking about disciplines that they're not pure experts in, so can I, and so can you. I love running my mouth on the internet. The Siki letter says, body was found burnt up in aluminum smelter 3 a.m. Friday morn. Siki. That's the text. But I'm still waiting for Ed Edwards Ciphers to share some things here. You're reading the letter in English. Okay. Ed Edwards Ciphers, what language should I use? It's not English? What language should I use? It's Old Norse. Ah, crap. No, I was just thinking of the poem, For What Died the Sons of Roshin. Was it French or Dutch or German that inscribed the epitaph of Emmet? When we sold enough of Ireland to be but slaves in it? Old Norse. Are you sure this is an Old Norse, Ed Edwards? Because body was burnt up in aluminum smelter 3 a.m. Friday morn. Siki. Okay, I know one Old Norse word because you said that the Zodiac wrote about SLA. SLA, slay, an Old Norse word meaning kill. Well, where exactly do I see the word slay or kill in this Siki letter? Body was found burnt up in an aluminum smelter 3 a.m. Friday morning. Friday morn, M-O-R-N, it does say. I don't want to get too far out on that one. Okay, here's a post. Somebody has written something out here. It's written in bind runes. A550RTUPINATUNA. Is this what you're talking about? Aso ritu pina tuna non-smelt 3 a.m. Okay, they got those. Somebody has used this as some type of substitution cipher. That's not yours? All right, well, Ed Edwards Ciphers. It appears that you have translated this from old runes, Old Norse bind runes. What's the translation? It's a bind rune connotation? Well, what's it say? I mean, I'm openly asking you. You can tell I'm not going to chew your head off or anything. I just want to know what you mean by this. And I'm looking to see if it's been posted online at all. And in all seriousness, Ed Edwards, I'm not going to say anything bad about you if you reveal the translation. Are you going to say that this is some type of anagram? Because these are very clearly English language words. But feel free to give anything you want here. And also, I would like to remind you guys that this is True Crime Talk Radio in the morning. You can share anything you want in the comment section. I would like to open up the floor to True Crime Talk. Okay, Ed Edwards says you won't find it online. I haven't fully decrypted it. It's a nomenclature cipher. Ed Edwards, you can write me at blackboxonlineradio@aol.com. Ned DeHaan on Facebook, BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram. You know where to find me. I want to read your solution. And because this is an episode where I can talk about any case under the sun or in the darkness, I encountered one very recently that bothered me to a certain extent, and it was the story of Gregor Shaw. And I found this on some kind of weird YouTube channel that had like 2 videos. And Gregor Shaw was a man in Missouri who abducted 2 women, and he kept them chained up in his basement for 12 years. And then all of a sudden, one day they were able to break free. And I thought it was a rather bizarre story. They didn't use any videography. They only had 3 photos, one of Gregor Shaw and 2 of the female victims. And then the next step was, talking about he's convicted in the court cases. And I was reminded of an episode of Profiling with Pat Brown when she talked about how she saw a video like that once and she didn't believe it. She didn't believe that this thing actually happened with a Richard Engelbert. Yeah, the murder of Richard Engelbert. So she decided to start investigating that case, and it turned out that it was all made up. It was made up by a true crime channel that was using, photos that were probably AI generated, but she's like, they said he was a real estate agent in Colorado. She's like, there's not a single real estate agent in Colorado with that name. I began reading about the story of Gregor Shaw, who imprisoned 2 women in his basement for 12 years in Missouri. I couldn't find anything about it either. And I'm sure one of you guys might do a Google search right now and find a trove of information. I'm blind as a bat, I admit it. But what I did find was that there was a story of 3 women who were abducted in Cleveland and held hostage. And there was also a story from Missouri of 2 boys that were abducted and held hostage. And they were abducted at different times, though, because one of them was abducted at 4 years before the other one, and he was held hostage for 4 years. It appeared that he was able to leave the apartment under certain threats and coercive measures. But other than that, the story of Gregor Shaw abducting 2 women, I couldn't find anything on that case. And I'm going to do a quick search here, and I'm going to see if just anything comes up this time. Gregor Shaw. Yeah, all I can really get is that he is a football player. By football, I mean what us Americans call soccer. And then I would really hope that people wouldn't do this, because they're just sort of messing around at this point, when I think you guys must have seen some true crime channels like this. If you watch a lot of true crime content, you've probably seen the channels where they don't have anything on camera. They don't have sources. They just have like photos, maybe music in the background. They have an AI generated voiceover narrator, something to that effect. They definitely have a computer generated voice. And they aren't necessarily showing you where this information is coming from. And if people want to tell stories, tell your stories. But if it's fictional, present it as fiction. And I mean, I'm just doing another search here. Gregor Shaw abduction. I find absolutely nothing about this case. And I wrote the White Horse Killer saga, which is based on the Zodiac Manson connection. It has nothing to do with the real Zodiac Killer. It's fiction. It's a story. And the 4th story is coming out on the weekends, The Eyes of the White Horse, which you can hear in audiobook format here on YouTube. You can hit the like button and subscribe if you want. And if you're just curious, there are also lots of stories that incorporate real figures, real historical figures into them, but they're presented as fiction. Like Yours Truly, Jack the Ripper by Pamela West, Night of the Ripper by Robert Bloch, and one of them that I've talked about on Black Box Online Radio, Ripper by Dean B. Cloud. There are fictional stories that incorporate Jack the Ripper. And it's rather pathetic that someone would think that they have to just make up a true crime case and present it as a fact, that they're presenting it as nonfiction when it is nothing of the sort. Now, Ed Edwards has something here about the Siki cipher, saying, "Oh no, this is a different type of cipher, the Zodiac Circle Path cipher." Let me see if I've missed something in the chat here. I recently found out Ed's aunt lived in Riverside. She then moved to Washington and Maple in San Francisco. She lived at both locations for those murders. Ed lived with her. And you found this because of a Zodiac Circle Path cipher. Ed Edwards was a real serial killer who targeted couples parked in cars at lovers' lanes. It seems like he was in California at the time. But Ed Edwards ciphers, as I recall, you don't think that Ed Edwards was the Zodiac. Is that what you've said in some previous episodes? And again, you can put anything you want in the comment section down below. And as I said, I have lots of stories and lots of episodes about the case of Steven Avery. But if I could recommend one of them to you, it would be the one on the murder of Teresa Halbach. That's just what you're going to see in the title, The Murder of Teresa Halbach, here on Black Box Online Radio. Because one point where I agree with Ken Kratz is that she becomes the footnote. And that's bad. She becomes the footnote. And, it's a shame. This should be her story. But no matter what anybody thinks about Steven Avery, he becomes the title character. Brendan Dassey is discussed more than Teresa. Ken Kratz and Jerry Buting are probably discussed more than Teresa. Yes, as Edward says here, Teresa Marie Halbach. And the episode that I did is called The Murder of Teresa Halbach. It was done for the old Anything Goes Friday segment. And that is something that I did very frequently in 2022. I did multiple episodes on Making a Murderer and responding to the Netflix docuseries, responding to some of the books out there. I would just leave you with that one. And when Rob says, interesting case, did you mean Steven Avery or Gregor Shaw, Rob Beansman? Which one did you mean? So this episode is going to be winding down, but I also want to let you guys know that there are going to be a lot more things coming out on Black Box Online Radio. We have Cooper Friday this week, going to be talking about some brand new material, and I have something that's going to be very technical for Ripper Wednesday. Every Wednesday I do a segment about Jack the Ripper. And a big thank you to everybody again who listened to the episode with the interview that I did with David Oranchak for Zodiac Monday. That is one that I've wanted to do for a very long time. Back in 2021, we did the Interview with the Experts series on the Zodiac Killer channel, where we released more than a dozen interviews with people who are sharing their thoughts and findings about the Zodiac Killer. And we really wanted David Oranchak to be part of that, but we weren't able to get in touch with him. And a lot of things have changed since over the last 3 years. And I've had some correspondences with David Oranchak. We both showed up, on this one discussion forum at once for like 30 seconds, exchanging some messages. And we had tried to arrange the interview in the past for Black Box Online Radio. And really, I was just glad that he agreed to come on the program to talk about his observations with the Zodiac ciphers. And there's some things that are a little bit easier to say when you're not interviewing somebody. There's some things that are a little bit easier to say when you're talking indirectly. And that is that it took David Oranchak 14 years to solve the Zodiac Killer's 340 cipher. 14 years. Rome was not built in a day. And it really is difficult for people to understand how somebody can follow a true crime case and an unsolved mystery for more than a decade and not have the answers. And also to look at a particular aspect of the case. Like on the Zodiac Killer panel discussion show, I was talking about how Chad Burke has spent 6 years working only on the Z13 cipher. Maybe one day he'll solve it. 14 years on the Zodiac Killer's 340 cipher. But at the end of the day, David Oranchak, Ural Van Eyck, and Sam Blake made the discovery. And I do believe their solution is correct. We were talking about that during the interview about how some people challenge the solution. No, I believe that they have solved that because let's say, look at the challenge. That the computer helped them, the software program helped them. Even if you had a quadrillion possibilities, the fact that they were able to get one that has grammatically correct structures, Zodiac esoteric Zodiac language, and a contemporary reference that talks about the Zodiac Killer's false appearance on a TV show. All of those things are in order, with genuine Zodiac misspellings, spelling Zodiac. That's Zodiac is spelled in the unencrypted text, but genuine Zodiac misspellings such as Paradise, Paradice. That's the real solution, people. Ed Edwards says, the Z13, to think that you can solve that in less than 14 years for the other ones is not to understand ciphers. Yes, I agree completely. The Z13 is one that is going to need more than 14 years. No, Ed Edwards is saying the misspellings that are found in the Zodiac's letters are found not to be misspellings. When people make a case for this, show me your evidence. I'm going to approach it with an open mind. Lots of people have said that. Dirt Poor Richard, for example. Thomas Henry Horan has said that, for example. A lot of people believe that these are just clues to a bigger meaning. Ray Grant is here. And Ray Grant says, ask Dave if he wants to debate me on your channel. Sure, Ray. Gladly. I'll pass that on. And now, Ray, is there a particular aspect of the case that you would like to debate David Oranchak on? Would it be disputing the 340 cipher solution, or would it be something else? I mean, as you heard in the interview, if you listened to that one, he has made a lot of comments about the Z13, the Z32, all of them. And this is something else that I want to reinforce, that we're discussing this on the panel discussion show on Mysteries with Mr. Belgique. Some people might get a few ideas about something, a far off portion of a true crime case. Let's say you're following the Zodiac Killer mystery, but you look at the Scorpion ciphers and you get an idea for it. I say pursue it. Will you get the Zodiac Killer's identity if you can crack one of the Scorpion ciphers? I don't know, because I don't know what's in them. But if you think that you can solve it, try. I wouldn't discourage anybody from that. I wouldn't tell them that it's a waste of time. I wouldn't think that it's, an impractical use of one's abilities, because people are going to look at these true crime cases in different ways. Prime example, Ed Edwards is talking about how he has recognized this hidden meaning to the Siki letter in Making a Murderer. If you think you're onto something, explore it, present your findings, prepare to be challenged, and also prepare to accept criticism. Mike is here. He says Zodiac isn't going to tell us who he is. No, highly unlikely. Dave thought so too. Ray says his episode 9, which uncovers the undertext. Sure, Ray. I'll pass that on. And if you have any other pieces of info you want me to share in a message, I will do that. And Ed Edwards says the misspellings were found to be not to be misspellings. They're arcane spellings. It's on Reddit. It's just a mystery in itself, Ed Edwards, about why the Zodiac would use misspellings. Lots of killers did this. Lots of people who wrote letters taking credit for stuff had frequent misspellings. Jack the Ripper's letters have misspellings in them. And as I said, this episode of True Crime Talk Radio in the Morning is going to be winding down. If anybody has any final comments, you can put them in the comment section down below. You can also support this channel at blackboxonlineradio. No, that's the other thing. buymeacoffee.com/blackboxnet88. For some reason, I was thinking of my email address. And you can also support this channel with the super chats and super thanks here on YouTube. Casbah says, good day to you too. And also, you can write the show at blackboxonlineradio@AOL.com. I got it that time. And you can use blackboxnet88 on Instagram, Ned DeHaan on Facebook, Blackbox Online Radio on Facebook. I also have a TikTok page, blackboxnet88, but I only use that for uploading the shorts that come out Monday through Friday here on Blackbox Online Radio. Ray says, it's clear from Dave's episode 9 that there's a second message under the English. Sure. If you want to debate him, you are welcome to do that here on Blackbox Online Radio. Let's throw something together. If he will do that. And Ray, I will let you know one thing in advance, which you probably already know, but Dave Oranchak is very busy and he has a lot of interactions, and we had to really find just one open time slot in his schedule a month in advance for that interview. I'm not even joking, but I'll try my best. And Darkside says, great chat and great comments. And yes, you too, Darkside. And Darkside brought up a very big point. We can disagree about things, and we can still have discussions. Because just because you disagree on something does not mean you have any bad blood towards somebody. Okay, so everybody, have a nice day, have a nice evening. Snoopy and I are going to chill for a second, and I will see you tomorrow on Ripper Wednesday talking about Jack the Ripper. Until next time.